possibly developing a single presentation format. They're doing this it turns out, in Haverhill. The mayor is starting to institute that. You have lower electric rates than a lot of places because of hydro. Very good. That's why we're bringing the High Performance Computing Center here, why you've been able to get it. You've been proactive in using state and federal grants for parking facilities. Very important for firms. They want to know they can have their employees can park close. You're near universities and colleges, increasingly important. Not just the four-year colleges, really important. We're finding out the vocational schools and community colleges. And you've got one right here. That you should take advantage of. In fact, when I was down in the South and I was talking with folks, I was talking with an economic development expert to the governor of North Carolina, an old friend of mine, Jack Casarda. And Jack said, well, you know, when a firm comes to a town in Massachusetts and they really look like they're excited about the possibility of moving there, who's the first person that CEO of that prospective firm sees in your town? And I said, I have no idea, you know? I guess the economic development person in the state. He said, well, let me tell you what we do here in North Carolina. Who is the first person that you see? Anybody have a guess in North Carolina? Pardon?
College president.
The president of the community college, right? And that president has also been told what to say by the mayor, which is, we will train your workforce, and when that plant is up and running, we'll have a labor force for you. That's really important. And when we did a big study of manufacturers throughout the state, a staying power report that you can pull off of our website, right up at the top, besides the cost of power, electricity, scared to death about where the labor force will come, particularly given these demographics. How do you replace a manufacturing labor force where the average age today in Massachusetts is over 51 years? You're going to need to figure out how to do that. You also have a larger proportion of your workforce who are professionals. You also have a larger proportion who have very few skills. It's kind of a bimodal distribution here that is both a strength but also weaknesses. So what are some of the weaknesses we found? Well, all you have to do is look outside. Lots of vacant commercial buildings, lots of boarded up stuff, and I know you're starting to work on that, or you've been working on it for some time. But it's something that those site specialists, they see it, it scares them. It scares them. More dilapidated housing stock goes along with that. You have more Class C and Class B office space, but less Class A. To the extent that you want to be able to bring businesses here, some of them would like to have pretty good office space. Fewer manufacturing general office sites with on-site parking. Got to continue to work on that. Somewhat higher parking fees, not as important as others. Things here, higher rents, particularly in your uptown sites, relative to some other communities. So those are the kinds of things that you need to think about. Also, workforce appears on average to be less educated than some other communities that you might be competing with. So we also, as I said, for the first time, we have a city that did it in 06 and 11, 5 years apart. So what did we find when we looked at that? Stronger enforcement of codes and regulations on abandoned buildings, trash, etc. Great. You're really improving there, and it's an important place to improve. There's an increase in the proportion of greenfield sites that are available. Again, very, very good. Increase in the proportion of commercial sites that are 5 acres or larger, particularly for firms who want some space, not only to settle, but possibly to expand. And you've had a small increase in your home ownership rate, which again is a signal to firms that this is a stable community. So those are some places where you've seen some real improvement. There are also a few weaknesses. There's more vacant commercial buildings today than in 2006. There's an increase of rent, particularly in Ingleside, and an increase in the crime rate, which is a real serious problem. That one, I hope we'll come back and talk about a whole lot, maybe not today, but in the future. And a decrease in the percentage of high school students proficient in English and math, as you've seen kind of a demographic change. Again, the kinds of things that folks are looking at. So that's what we found so far. We'll be working through these data, working with the mayor, working with Kathy and others to refine this. But we hope on the basis of that to be able to come to much better, clearer understanding of what's really important in economic development, what we can do here in Holyoke. And then what I'm hoping we can do is also, bottom line in all of this, is we need to change the cognitive map, the maps that people have in their heads about places. I can ask you, when you hear, even if you've never been there, but you hear the word Detroit, what do you think, right? Well, there actually are some very nice parts of Detroit. They're just not depicted on television, right? What we need to do, and what we hope this process will help, think about it as almost a marketing strategy, is begin to find ways of changing the cognitive maps that many people have, particularly firms, particularly firm and location specialists, about where is Holyoke today, what its real strengths are, so that we can begin to have them singing the praises of this city and helping firms to make the decision to locate here. Thank you.
And I'm going to watch the clock carefully. But let me just, Dan, if it's okay, see if there's a couple questions for a follow-up here, and I'll just come to you and wait for it, please, Alan. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Barry. That was great and really a good analysis, I thought, of Holyoke and up-to-the-minute analysis, and with many hopeful parts to it, I think. But a question about the workforce, because we see this in our economic development prospecting and dealing with site selectors who are looking at the region. Workforce is always the first question, usually. And when we talk about workforce, we talk about the region's workforce because it's transient. So how do you feel about the mitigation of the workforce numbers that may exist in a given municipality with regard to the regional asset? How do you measure that? How do you model that?
Well, one of the things we hope to be working very closely with Tim, who we've worked with before in the Pioneer Valley, is to really take a look at what the workforce looks like. I'm also hoping that I'll have a chance on one of my trips here to meet with the folks from Holyoke Community College. I want to see what their curriculum looks like. I want to know what they're teaching. I hear it's a great school. One of the things that I've been talking with the new treasurer of the state, Steve Grossman, about is Steve is actually the treasurer. Also is the person who oversees the Massachusetts School Building Authority. They give out hundreds of millions of dollars a year for renovating schools, building new schools, and they're getting lots of requests from the vocational high schools. They've decided they need to know whether those vocational high schools are actually training people for the jobs in the future. We created another program at Dukakis Center called the Labor Market Assessment Tool. What it does is it allows us to have really great detailed information on what the skill sets will be needed in the future for any detailed type of firm. In fact, we just ran it through for biotech testing laboratories. And of course, people thought, well, these are just all PhDs, right? Biotech testing labs. 30% of the jobs require nothing more than an associate's degree. 23% of the jobs require no more than a high school degree. That's important to know. As we go through and we identify, or you identify, the kinds of industries you think you can bring here and want to bring here, LMAT is in a position to say, okay, these are exactly the skills we need, and we should be making sure that the community colleges and the voc schools here are equipped, have the facilities to be able to fulfill that need.
Come to you. Introduce yourself.
Bill Ward, Executive Director of the Workforce Board in Hamden County.
Hi, Bill.
Nice to see you, Barry. Good to see you. One of the comments you made relative to the demographics of the city was this kind of bifurcation, if you will, of a lot of very young people and the older population, these two extremes in large numbers and maybe a flattening out of the middle group.
Right.
My question to you is this. How does your organization at Northeastern work with Andy Sum and the Center for Labor Market Studies, which is doing an incredible amount of work today on youth populations and youth development?
Right.
Because that's our pipeline to the
I
future.
have two hats. I wear two
Okay.
hats. I'm the director of the Dukakis Center for Urban and Regional Policy, which is a research center about the same as the Center for Labor Market Studies, which Andy runs. I am also the dean of the School of Public Policy and Urban Affairs. And as such, the Center for Labor Market Studies, which Andy runs, and Paul Harrington used to be there, is now at Drexel, and their staff, and the Dukakis Center are the two major centers. So indeed, when we showed you those demographic projections, I actually had Andy's staff run those out for us. So we work very closely with Andy and his staff, Andy Sum and his staff. So we've been looking at these projections with them. And of course, we're now looking at all the workforce needs with them. And the combination of having the labor market assessment tool into Andy's shop, Plus, I should add that I was able to also add to our staff this year Alan Clayton Matthews, who is the state's economic forecaster and a member of the Governor's Council of Economic Advisors. So we have a very, very powerful team of folks who know what's going on in the labor market.
I think
and so
one thing
forth.
that would be helpful to this region, and I've had that discussion with Andy some, is that we take a look at this youth population and drill down now,
Yes.
especially in terms of its skill sets and what needs to happen, because we kind of tend to agree here in Western Massachusetts that these two community colleges that we have, which are so closely aligned, need to gear up and redesign and take new looks. I think the center, transportation center here, is the beginning of how you begin to impact that youth population,
Right.
which is critical.
Yeah. I'm very fortunate because A, I'm old, B, I'm tenured at a private university, and C, I have an endowed chair. As such, it's very difficult for the president of the university to get rid of me. I have to do something like burn down half the campus before there's a hearing. And therefore, I can say this safely. We actually spend too much time in this state saluting the great private universities of Harvard, MIT, Northeastern, BU, BC. I've taught at most of these places. You know where the action is? They're in the community colleges. That's what's really going to make a difference. I know we're going to have the superstars. We're going to keep putting them out. The real question is whether we're going to have what the Federal Reserve Bank calls, here in Boston, calls the middle level skills.
Middle skills.
And Alicia Sasser, who's a colleague of ours at the Fed, just put out a study, which you may have seen, Bill, which says over the next 10 years, the big gap is going to be in the middle skills. And that's what business is worried about. Where do they get those middle skills? They know they can get the engineers. They know they can get the white coats. The real question is, will they have people who know how to operate a piece of, computerized numerical control machinery and put out a really good plastic part?
So one of the things that we need to grapple with here then is if you have a conversation with Bill Messner and Ira Rubensall, the first thing they'll say to you is, our enrollment is up, state investment in community colleges is down. So we have a huge public policy issue right there that we need to look at
Yeah.
moving forward.
Well, you'll be
Especially
thrilled to
when-
hear, and I'm pretty sure that Mr. Mesner will be thrilled to hear, that when we had the Commonwealth Summit a weekend ago, with the governor and the lieutenant, all those people I said exactly the same thing as did many of the business leaders, saying we need to pay a lot more attention to our community colleges. Holyoke Community College, as a matter of fact, is one of the best in the state. I work with Bunker Hill and Roxbury Community College, where we've just raised the graduation rate, raised it to 9%.